kanalıyla ilgili soru alıyorum da mesajlardan. Bir sıkıntı yok herhalde, değil mi size gelen?
Şu anda YouTube'da canlı yayındayız. İşletme Fakültesi YouTube kanalından şu anda izleniyoruz. Herkes hoş geldi.
Okay, so I would like to welcome everyone. I'm here representing our Dean, Professor Çağnur Balsarı. I'm the Associate Dean of the Faculty of Business. So I would like to welcome our guests from UNHCR and our students to the Passengers of the Unity Ship webinar organized by the Faculty of 9 Eylül University Faculty of Business and Geo Relations Commission in cooperation with UNHCR. We are very excited to host our guests today here, and we are delighted to announce that we will also have a collaboration agreement signed between our university and UNHCR in 1 month's time. And this is, I hope this first event paves the way for more fruitful relationships between our institutions. We have had experience with refugees throughout our history, most recent one being the one from Syria. And being a refugee or being displaced from your home is incomprehensible for most of us. However, the world history is full of these instances, and I think that understanding the hardship of the lives of the refugees and being able to help is a humanitarian obligation for all of us. And we hope that this webinar will shed more light on these issues and make us understand these hardships and the life of a refugee. And I would like to thank the UNHCR representative, Mr. Philippe Leclerc, and Speaker Selin Ünal for being with us today. And I would also like to thank our moderator, Untitled Chapter, for being here with us and moderating this webinar. And the organization, of course, would not be possible without the efforts of our instructor Meltem Kolday, Dr. Özge Özgen, Sinem Apka, and our students Fatma Gül Oturak, Erce Bilgen, Furkan Bostancı, Mücahit Ünsal, and Zeynep Elif Turgut, and they are also with us today. And I hope this informative webinar achieves its goal and increases our awareness and empathy regarding refugees. And I don't want to keep too long, and I would like to leave the floor to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Durukan. I'm Zuhal Ünal Cepel, and from the Department of International Relations. To be honest, I'm really excited to be here to moderate this beautiful event. What do we aim here is to increase the awareness of our students on the role of UNHCR in protection of the rights of refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers, to distinguish the concepts, the differences between those concepts, and to know facts on more than 4 million refugees in Turkey and also in other countries. Now, I would like to turn to Mr. Philippe Leclerc. Let me introduce Mr. Leclerc. Firstly, he has been UNHCR representative in Turkey since January 2021. Before that, Mr. Leclerc had been UNHCR representatives of Greece and France. He has been working for UNHCR for 31 years, and we will be delighted to hear your experiences. So I would like to leave the floor to you, dear Leclerc, for your presentation.
Thank you very much. First, Professor Banu Durukan, and also to the Dean. And indeed, I'm very happy to be with your university today to have this exchange. And we will soon be signing a cooperation agreement as well. Actually, very close to World Refugee Day, which is on the 20th of June. So as you have heard, I am fresh in Turkey because I arrived both in COVID time in Ankara at the beginning of the year in January, and we are soon in June, so it's only 5 months that I have been in your country, in Turkey. But before arriving already in Turkey, I have heard so much about the policy of Turkey and the fact that Turkey is hosting now 4 million refugees, or at least 3.7, around a million Syrians and other international protection applicants, mainly from Iraq, Afghanistan, but also other countries in the world, including from Africa, for example, and Asia. So it's not new in any way that Turkey is hosting a large number, and the first country in the world hosting refugees now for more than 6 years, being the first country of asylum in the world. Before it was mostly Iran and Pakistan who were hosting large populations of Afghans for a very long time. As you know, that the Afghan conflict has been going on almost for 40 years. We hope that this will not be the case, of course, for Syria. Well, perhaps just getting back to more generalities as well, I just remembered that it's the 7th anniversary, actually, of UNHCR this year, as this organization was created by the General Assembly and ECOSOC in December 1950 to deal with the consequences of the Second World War and also what had happened before the Second World War, where many people have been fleeing persecution and armed conflict. And just after December 50, the 1951 Convention on Refugee Status was also enacted in July 1951. So we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Geneva Convention as well. And basically, these acts in those years, just after the Second World War, plus the 1967 protocol, which was enacted in 1967, are the legal international foundations of refugee protection. One had hoped in the beginning that this issue of refugee would be solved with the end of the consequences of the war, but this was certainly not the case, because we have seen during history with the decolonization also quite a lot of armed conflict, which led to refugee situations in the 60s, in the 70s, many other conflicts throughout the world, and that have not enabled the temporary creation of the UNHCR to only be temporary. In the beginning, the mandate of UNHCR was renewed on a 3 or 5 year basis, and at one stage, in view of the situation that we could observe, and even in the last 10 years, an ever-increasing number of refugees because of additional conflicts, because of the non-capacity of the international community to solve some of the old conflicts, we have seen over the years an increase of the refugee population, which last year, with the latest numbers that we could provide, reached 26.4 million refugees, if you count the 5.7 million Palestinians who are not formally under the mandate of UNHCR, but under the mandate of UNRWA, at least in the areas where UNRWA is operating, which is the occupied territories, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. If I'm not, now I have a doubt on Egypt, but and Jordan as well. So an ever-increasing number of refugees in the late 10 years, and again, a non-capacity of the international protection mechanisms, also of peace resolution, of also, as we see often, the Security Council being paralyzed by vetoes of permanent member states, leads to the persisting situation of conflict And as we have seen in the last years, less voluntary return possibilities. When I started, as you have said, in UNHCR 31 years ago or 30 years ago, in 90, I remember that we were often organizing voluntary repatriation in many situations where the situation allowed for the return, be it, for example, for South Africa, with many people who had left, and with the ending of the apartheid, many refugees could come back. In Mozambique as well, we have seen many returns. More recently, in Côte d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast, some returns indeed could take place, but I would say that the sad situation is more that there are ongoing conflicts or not sufficiently resolved conflicts allowing for a massive return of refugees on a voluntary basis and on a durable basis. Afghanistan being one of these situations where more than 5 million actually refugees at one stage had been seeking and were seeking protection in Pakistan and Iran in particular, and have been living there for decades. The same could be said of many Myanmar refugees, as well as more recently situations in Latin America where from Venezuela many people had more than 3 million had to flee their country and sometimes continue fleeing to Colombia and other parts of Latin America. So this is a widespread phenomenon where people basically cannot benefit from state protection and are obliged to leave their country to save their lives, to save their freedom. Often it's not only armed conflict, of course, and I will come to the basic definition of a refugee, which is in the Article 1 of the Geneva Convention. It's any person who would be threatened with persecution on the basis of race, political opinion, belonging to a social group, race, and I forgot one. We'll come back. So again, so this notion of persecution, either by the state, because this is how the definition of a refugee was meant in the 50s when the 1951 convention was discussed. Basically, refugees are entitled to international protection because the normal entity supposed to protect them is not protecting them. The state is not protecting them, is actually not only not protecting them, but persecuting them on the reasons that I mentioned. And this leads to an international protection regime, which is supposed to replace the state protection of the country of origin once a person has left the territory of the country of origin. It's only once a person has been able to flee and ask for protection outside of his or her country of origin that the refugee regime can start. And now you have around 150 states which have ratified the Geneva Convention and or the 1967 Protocol. So this, again, is the general refugee protection regime. Of course, some of these developments have also taken place on a regional basis, where some continents, some regions have established specific protection regimes for refugees, and sometimes going beyond refugees, persons with subsidiary protection. There are many legal definitions all over the globe which refer to situations of displacement of refugees or persons who are not recognized as refugees because states sometimes apply a restrictive definition, understanding of the definition of refugee, and then go for other definition, extended regimes for people that they do not consider or recognize as refugees. And this is the case in Latin America with the Cartagena Declaration, with the OAU, and of course with the European Union having its own internal regional directives to deal with refugee protection and subsidiary protection. And in all these situations, so UNHCR plays either an operational role in supporting states to deal with the arrival, the registration, the support to refugees, in particular when there are massive arrivals of them. And again, some countries are obviously receiving far more refugees than others, and it's very important to ensure that there's more responsibility sharing between states, so that Turkey, for example, does not end to be alone supporting the situation of 4 million refugees. The same could be said about Colombia receiving up to 2 million refugees from Venezuela, Pakistan 1.4 million Afghan refugees, and before in 10 or 20 years ago it was up to 3 million. Uganda, Germany, these are the states who are receiving most of the refugees. And of course it depends on the population of your country that you have to see whether the population rate versus of refugees versus the total population is limited. For example, a country of Liechtenstein would be swamped with refugees with only perhaps 3,000 people arriving. It would be similar to what Turkey is receiving in comparison to the Liechtenstein population. So of course, we need always to adapt to the various situations and to the possibilities of the state to be able to protect and provide durable solutions for refugees. I would just like to mention again that the mandate of UNHCR, as it was defined in 1950, has evolved over time with some UN General Assembly resolutions extending its mandate. But the first mandate is the refugee protection, contributing to both identifying, registering, and protecting refugees wherever they are. But depending on the capacity of the states where they are, the role of UNHCR can be more operational than others. For example, in the United States of America, we are not operationally engaged, apart from some particular situations like helping for resettlement to the US. So industrialized states, unless they are severely affected by really mass influx, usually UNHCR does not have a fully operational role, which is different in other countries where this role may be operational, fully operational, and sometimes UNHCR has, to a certain extent, to substitute to the state to assist and protect refugees, of course, in agreement with that state, and specific agreements are done in that case. The second element of the mandate of UNHCR is to research for durable solutions, because it's not an end in itself to be a refugee. Of course, it's important to protect refugees, but the international community of the time had asked UNHCR to look for durable solutions. So what are these durable solutions? Traditionally, the first durable solution that we can all think of is that the conditions that led to persecution or to war have ended in the country of origin, and because of a stable situation, refugees can return to their countries of origin. As I was saying before, in the last 10 years, this has not been happening much because many of the situations that were going through conflict, either the conflict has become either mild, but has not enabled sufficient stability for people to return massively to their countries of origin. So if there's no lasting peace, it is very difficult for people to envisage voluntary return, and also for the refugee status to be seized, which is foreseen by the Geneva Convention, that if the conditions which have led to the recognition of refugee status stop and in a durable fashion, then the refugee protection can be seized, because it's not, the state can again protect its citizens. But all this requires quite a lot of interpretation, and there have been different practices by states of applying, for example, what is called the cessation clause. So durable solutions, indeed, voluntary repatriation is usually referred to as the best solution. But at the same time, when people have been staying for 20 or 30 years in exile, particularly if children have never seen their country of origin, this choice may be more difficult to be made, both for the individuals concerned, but also for the state hosting them. and situations are very different in many countries, in many situations. And we could, of course, think of what will be the situation when hopefully at one stage Syria will become peaceful again, and where return could be envisaged for a large number of Syrian people living in Turkey. If that happens, for the time being, the situation is still extremely problematic in Syria, with not sufficient political developments enabling people to return, and very serious security difficulties, which would not allow a massive return, definitely for the time being. The two other durable solutions that UNHCR classically looks at is resettlement, that I referred to, which is when people cannot stay in the first country of asylum, or when there are too many. It's very important to be able to organize resettlement as either a protection tool, because it's not possible for the refugees to stay long in their first country of asylum for various reasons, mainly protection or vulnerability. One can think, for example, of some countries where medical support is extremely weak and not even enough for the nationals, and that's such resettlement programs can benefit very vulnerable refugees, so to be resettled to other countries. For example, in Turkey, we would estimate that around 450,000 of the people who are in Turkey should benefit from resettlement to other countries. But in view of the fact that this is a voluntary decision of states to provide places for resettlement, we cannot resettle the people that we would like to resettle from Turkey and from other countries to industrialized countries in particular. The third durable solution is often labeled as local integration, meaning that people, refugees, remain in the country of asylum and live as normally as they can, with the rights entitled to them in terms of access to employment, access to health, access to education, which anyway for education and health should be done if a state has ratified the 1951 Convention or the 1967 Protocol. But basically, integration would mean that people stay for a long time and a long term in their country of residence. The ultimate result of local integration is also foreseen in the Geneva Convention as asking states to facilitate acquisition of nationality, so naturalization. So this may be an option also based on the Geneva Convention, but it's in no way states are obliged to grant nationality to refugees, but this is something that the convention asks states to facilitate when refugees have stayed for a very long time and have strong links to the country, and that obviously within the nationality law or the citizenship law of the country, they require, they fulfill the requirements to acquire that nationality. But again, what is often said for refugees is that some of the conditions can be made more easier to facilitate that acquisition of nationality, because it is not seen possible for the persons also to return. And for example, Turkey, as I have understood in the last 10 years, has granted nationality to 150,000 refugees from Syria in the last 10 years. Many of the children also were born in Turkey or in other countries, and sometimes the fact that you are born in a country and if you stay for some time is also fulfilling the conditions of naturalization. So again, these are the three main types of durable solutions that the states foresee and that UNHCR is researching. I would just mention in the mandate of UNHCR something which is less known, which is also not for refugees specifically, but to fight against statelessness, the fact that persons have no nationality. It may seem like this is something which does not happen, but UNHCR has identified at least 15 million people who are without a nationality for various reasons. Either they may be linked to historical conflicts where some part of the population did not acquire the nationality at the time of the independence or the separation of states. It can be discriminatory provisions regarding transmission of nationality between fathers and mothers. It can be arbitrary deprivation of nationality, and again, but not all refugees or not all stateless people are refugees. And again, this is a role that UNHCR is playing and reinforcing, so that we eliminate as much as possible throughout the world people who still are stateless. And I can talk to you about it as well, because in addition to the places that you said I was, so representative of UNHCR in Greece in the last 5 years before coming to Turkey, as well as in France for 5 years. I was also in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Cameroon, and 2 times in headquarters, where I was in charge of response to statelessness for 5 years. So this is an issue that I know also well in different countries of the world, and how to respond to this phenomenon, which is one of the 2 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights: the right to be protected from persecution, meaning the right to asylum, and also the right to a nationality, which is also one of the 2 human rights announced in the Universal Declaration that UNHCR is very linked to, and is trying to assist states to provide protection as well as nationality. So perhaps I stop here and open the floor for questions and an exchange with you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Philippe Leclerc, especially for the durable solutions of UNHCR. I think our students have a more detailed idea about them. So let's start for the questions. As you said, the floor is yours, friends, our students. But we firstly prefer the conceptual, let's say, questions, and later the practices of the states and reflections over the refugees. Okay. Zeynep Elif Turgut, you can start for the conceptual questions.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Leclerc. It gives me a great pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you for your time and participation. I want to also express my gratitude for being a part of this team. My name is Zeynep Elif Turgut. I'm a third-year student in the Department of International Relations at Dokuzey University. Today, I have 4 questions, mostly about the terminology and 1951 Refugee Convention. My first question is, what is the correct terminology to be used when referring to Syrians who fled to Turkey, such as guests, migrants, or refugees? My second question is, what does it mean for a country to be safe for refugees and asylum seekers? My third question is there any state party to the 1951 Refugee Convention that does not follow the legal obligations under this convention? And what are the main sanctions UNHCR can apply to the states not following the obligations? My fourth and last question is, what is the non-refoulement principle, and does UNHCR adhere to this principle? Thank you very much.
Okay, so Zeynep Elif, thank you for the questions. Your questions are especially on the terminology. Yes, we are waiting for Mr. Leclerc. There may be a connection problem, maybe now. Let me check. Selin Hanım, maybe you can help us.
Yes, I was just informed that there's a little technical, there's a problem with the internet.
Yes. Now,
just a minute, I think we'll be
okay, enough. Now Mr. Leclerc is with us.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe he actually was not able to hear the, after the second question, he probably not heard the questions. Well, you may need to repeat it, Zeynep'cim, please, if you don't mind.
Okay. From the beginning or after second question?
Maybe it's good if you
Yeah,
start.
I didn't hear any. Sorry, I didn't hear any of the questions. So sorry for that. But we're connected again.
Hello again. Hello again. It gives me a great pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you for your time and participation again. I have 4 questions about the terminology and the 1951 Refugee Convention. My first question is, what is the correct terminology to be used when referring to Syrians who fled to Turkey, such as gas, migrants, or refugees? My second question is, what does it mean for a country to be safe for refugees and asylum seekers? My third question is there any state party to the 1951 Refugee Convention that does not follow the legal obligations under this convention? And what are the main sanctions UNHCR can apply to the states not following the obligation? My fourth and the last question is, what is the non-refoulement principle? And does UNHCR adhere to this principle? Thank you very much again.
Well, thank you very much. So thank you for these questions because they allow a clarification indeed of the legal concepts and the practice of states. Well, first, what is the correct terminology to use in Turkey, I understood, or in general, to use of migrants or refugees? I understand that this is for Turkey in particular, dealing with those who are arriving. So basically, as I was mentioning to you before, the Geneva Convention foresees that any person who would be fleeing his or her country for reasons of persecution on the basis of political opinion, race, belonging to a social group, should benefit from the protection of the country which has ratified the Geneva Convention in 1951 or the 1967 Protocol. This may also extend to armed conflict, and this has been interpreted that way in most of the situations. Actually, either by states which have ratified the Geneva Convention, but also some states which have never ratified the Geneva Convention, but feel bound by the rules of protecting people fleeing either armed conflict or persecution. So in such a situation, the general term and legal term used for such situation is refugees in relation to the 1951 Convention and the 1967 Protocol. Again, as I was mentioning, in other regions, sometimes there is an extension of the definition of refugees, which would allow the refugee definition to be extended, and that regime would also apply in those regions, which is not the case in the region of Turkey, be it Europe, the Middle East, or Asia, because we are in a country which is indeed at the crossroads of many regions. So this is an additional richness that Turkey may benefit from, because you can take actually hopefully the positive of each of the regions also, which are also that you partly belong to or that are surrounding you, be it the Middle East, I know this is sometimes disputed, but be it Europe, be it Asia. In Asia, there's not that much to take from instrumental protection instrument, because there are no specific regional conventions in Asia on this topic. So again, just to reply quickly and as simply as possible to your question, if persons are leaving in a forced manner because of the conditions again mentioned in the Geneva Convention, they should be treated, recognized as refugees, because again, it's a phenomenon of recognition. Basically, what eligibility authorities are supposed to do is to look at your application and recognize that you are in a situation of refugee. And this is why it's mentioned a recognition status. In case of mass influx, as Turkey has been exposed to since the conflict in Syria 10 years ago. And additionally, as we have seen, there are possibilities to apply more simple procedures, and there is a law here on temporary protection provided to Syrians who are fleeing their country and arriving in Turkey, and who will benefit from this regime, which does not require an individual recognition of refugee status in view of the high number of those arriving here, and also in view of the obvious situation of war, of a very serious conflict in Syria, which does not mean that you need to go through an individual recognition. Basically, what needs to be found by DGMM, by the Director General of Migration Management, in applying the law, is that basically you are a Syrian national, and because of that, you are entitled to temporary protection once you are registered and that you have made an application. So this is why there is often this issue of how should students, civil society, UNHCR, institutions, the President of the Republic. You have heard the President of the Republic referring often to refugees, but also to brothers and sisters, to hosts. But again, these people are fleeing a situation that they do not have the protection of their state of origin. You may hear that there are elections happening, but it is necessary that the political situation evolves in the way the United Nations has asked Syria to do for the state protection to be valid for these people. So again, in Turkey, Syrians will benefit from temporary protection. Other nationalities will apply for international protection. And this is also the law which foresees the procedure to be granted international protection. The addition for Afghans, Iraqis, others, and again, it's also talking almost to your next question on safety. A French citizen like me, not as a civil servant or an international civil servant of the United Nations, but any person may ask and should be able to ask for what is called asylum, usually. But if you would ask for international protection in Turkey, you may do so from any country, I would say, because there's always a risk in a particular situation that the present situation regarding this individual situation may lead that the person may be persecuted. Of course, there are countries in which far more guarantees are established so that you would not be at risk of persecution generally, and this is why there is a difference between often made in some states in their legislation or in regional situations like the European Union, referring to safe country of origin or safe country of asylum. But I'll come back to that quickly, because I think I have exhausted your first question on migrants, refugees, and again, beneficiaries of temporary protection. So in my view, a Syrian benefiting from temporary protection in Turkey is, in the global sense and in the sense we understand as UNHCR, a refugee. But at the same time, the law which is foreseen and regulating the entry of people arriving in mass from Syria, they are enjoying temporary protection in Turkey. And as UNHCR, because this is our role, we have to look whether the legislation protecting refugees is compatible with international law, and in particular for countries who have ratified the Geneva Convention, compatible with the Geneva Convention. And in our view, the legislation foreseen for temporary protection of Syrians in Syria, in Turkey, does so, because it provides all the basic rights and obligations, because refugees have both rights and obligations, You are not above the law if you have suffered, if you have persecuted. You still need to respect the law, but you also are entitled to rights. And this law provides the necessary rights in terms of access to health, access to education, access to employment, and all the necessary support that is provided to refugees and should be provided to refugees. So safe, just coming more quickly to safe. In the Geneva Convention, there is no specific definition or article dealing with safety. Basically, there's Article 1 of the Geneva Convention stating who is a refugee. And if you are a refugee and you satisfy that definition, you should be granted the rights foreseen by the Convention. The Convention also, you can make some reservation to some articles, so it doesn't mean that all the articles are mandatory for each state to apply. For example, for employment, there are possibilities for the state to make a reservation to that treaty and not apply all the article. But for others, like when we will come to the principle of non-refoulement that you have mentioned, Article 33 of the Geneva Convention, there is absolutely no reservation which can be made to this obligation of states. So safety, no, there is no specific reference to that. But there has been quite a lot of jurisprudence, of case law, of interpretation regarding whether you have to come directly, or actually directly from the country of origin to benefit from the Geneva Convention, and how do you interpret directly? And because sometimes you have people who come, for example, from Myanmar and will arrive in Europe. You may have to, if you are going by road, you will have had crossed perhaps 10 or more countries before you apply. So how come you do that? And there are rules that the states, either on a regional basis or on a national basis, have developed to deal with such applications. But again, in the international law as such, there is just this interpretation of directly. So you may have just, for example, mere transit in the opinion of UNHCR does not mean that you should be prevented from getting the protection of the Geneva Convention. If you have just been transiting a country and that you either were not in a position or not able to benefit or apply from protection in the other countries, that you have been traveling for various reasons because you thought that you have family members further away, this may lead to you being eligible for international protection, even though you do not come directly from that country. Of course, also, you may cross various countries that do not provide the necessary protection to asylum seekers, and there even more, your justification to apply elsewhere is validated. But of course, there are many discussions, not only in Europe, but in many states, which are trying to restrict the access to territory, as we have seen, for example, with the United Kingdom recent proposal to do extraterritorial, to look at extraterritorial applications for international protection, meaning that they would not enter into the substance of an application and would send the person back to a particular country or to a particular area in the world where they would assess the application, which in our view is contrary to the Geneva Convention. And it brings us to the violations of the Geneva Convention. You mentioned, are there states who violate the Geneva Convention or who do not apply it properly? Well, a lot of the work that UNHCR does on a regular basis is, first advising states when they adopt laws to regulate asylum or international protection or temporary protection. This is the first way by which UNHCR will be commenting on drafts legislation, which the states are supposedly obliged to submit to UNHCR. There's an Article 35 in the Geneva Convention with the supervisory role of UNHCR. So this is a first way of being able to guide, to advise states if some of the provisions of the law they want to enact would be contrary to the Geneva Convention, or to other important human rights instruments in this area. So we would flag, we would advise the state not to enact such legislation and propose alternative language for articles. So this is a very traditional role for UNHCR to play in many states. Sometimes states do not ask UNHCR and just want to go ahead. And this happens actually in many states, even though often states have learned that it's perhaps wiser even for them to benefit from that advice, because they won't have the problems that they will face in having a law which is violating international law. Other situations are wrong interpretation of the Geneva Convention, including also restrictive understanding of who is a refugee, with sometimes recognition rates which go very low for countries where obviously there is either armed conflict or severe persecution. And so the recognition rate and the comparison between countries can only be based not on a general manner, but for specific applications from countries. And again, sometimes people come from a particular part of the country where there is unrest, where there is no application of the law. So you have to differentiate between the individuals and their applications. So it's not that easy to make these comparisons. It's not only on the basis of general recognition rates, or even when it's national. It depends the profile of the applicants, if you belong to a certain ethnic group, if you belong to a certain part of the society which may face discrimination or persecution, either by law or by practice, including by prosecution. Because the fact that you are prosecuted in a country does not automatically mean that you are a criminal, because the legislation which may lead to this criminal decision may be contrary to international law, may be just discriminating on the basis of race. Or so again, even if you have a pronouncement on a part of a tribunal, you need to look at the specific situation in that country of origin, and whether all rule of law are applied, and whether this condemnation may not be the result actually of persecution and discrimination. So again, all this has to be, and you understand how much it is important that those who make these decisions, those who make the eligibility of refugee status, need to know very well what is the situation in the country of origin. And that's one of the difficulties, and that's one of the roles that UNHCR plays in various countries in the world to support the DGMMs of each of the countries. So this is about violations. No, there is nothing in the Geneva Convention which foresees the condemnation of a state which would violate the convention. So even UNHCR has a supervisory role but which is more, as I said, in terms of advice, in terms, of course, of public pronouncements, but we are not a judge, we are not an international judge, we are not a court, and we can only alert when there are massive violations, for example, of the principle of non-refoulement, or other very important elements of the refugee law. The opinion through campaigns that we can make also. So this is, but there is no mechanism like, for example, other human rights instruments like the Convention on the Rights of the Child, with the Committee on the Rights of the Child, with the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, or other mechanisms which foresee a specific committee that looks at that, or also in the other possibilities would be either at the national level, when there would be some wrongdoings and they will be condemned by the national judiciary, be it public or criminal or private. It depends on the different states. In Europe, for example, including in Turkey, even though there is no right to asylum. I was mentioning the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which refers to a right to asylum, but the European Convention on Human Rights that the European Court on Human Rights looks at does not foresee a specific article on asylum. So it's only through other means that other articles which would be violated, for example, on family life or procedures, that a state could be condemned by the European Court on Human Rights, including on collective expulsion, for example, or things of that sort, which can be, again, condemned and raised with the judiciary at the European Court for Human Rights level. The same for the European Union as well, because the Luxembourg Court is also now on some issues, also having some judgments on asylum-related issues. Coming to the principle of non-refoulement, the principle of non-refoulement is often described as the cornerstone of international refugee law, and it's understandable because it's the first element which will allow the protection to take place. It's the fact that if you arrive at the border of a state and you seek protection, you should not be refoulement, sent back to either the country of origin where you come from or to a state where there is a possibility of chain refoulement, because that state would not respect the principle of non-refoulement and would further send back the person to his or her country of origin. And of course, when there is a risk to your life and a risk to your freedom on the basis of the grounds that we have mentioned, there should be no mistake. A mistake, a violation of the principle, can mean that the person will die, will be killed, will be sentenced to 20, 30 life imprisonment, will be under torture. So these are extremely important decisions, and this is why the principle of non-refoulement is the first basis of the Geneva Convention and has acquired the level of customary international law, meaning that the states which are not bound by the Geneva Convention are bound by the customary rule which prevents and prohibits states to send back people who are seeking protection. It does not mean that these people will get protection, but they have to have access to an eligible body which is competent and which will be able to look at the reasons why the person is seeking protection and will see whether it applies to the national or the international context, and that protection should be granted. If not, then it is possible to send back a person to his country of origin, to deport him or her. Also, what we ask usually is that there is a possibility of appeal of the decision before a refoulement, an expulsion would take place. So again, these are all a lot of issues which are, of course, extremely important for the life, the protection of the people, and this is why UNHCR engages not only with the parliament, the government, the DGMM, but also the Coast Guard, the Gendarmerie in the respective countries, which are the state entities which will most probably be the first ones to be in contact with a person seeking protection. And often these people either have abandoned their identity documents because they are researched in their country of origin, and if they would be found, they might face difficulties. Of course, you have also, and I will end with that, sometimes people who are trying to abuse the system because there are no migration-related procedures often to enter industrialized states, and people, some who really have very legitimate needs like fleeing hunger or fleeing very difficult situations, but which do not satisfy the refugee protection thresholds, will sometimes also hide their documents because they believe by doing that, or because they are advised by smugglers to do it, wrongly of course, they will end up trying to make it difficult for the authorities to know their identity, so to prevent their forceful return to a country of origin. So these are all complicated issues that states have to deal with, and it's important that we assist them doing so, because otherwise often they take radical measures which are not in line with international law. Sorry for all these long replies, because I know you have many others.
Thank you.
These are important ones.
Thank you very much for the answers, illuminating answers. Zeynep Elif, in the name of you also, I say the thanks. So maybe, Mr. Leclerc, we can continue with the questions regarding the EU policies and some European countries' policies. Furkan Bostancı, our student, will ask questions on the topic. Yes, Furkan, the floor is yours.
First of all, even before starting my questions and before introducing myself, I'd like to say that having you here as a guest is a kind of great opportunity and chance for us. And all the answers you give us will contribute our academic studies and help us to clarify this sensitive issue. So thank you again. So my name is Furkan Bostancı. I graduated from International Relations Department, and right now I'm having a master's degree on foreign trade. But I have a special interest on European Union, and I'm studying on the European Union. So I will ask you one single question about the European Union and the Turkey. And my question is, of course, related to the migration issue. Since, according to statistics, each year, 500,000 foreign nationals are ordered to leave the European Union simply because they have entered or they stay in EU via irregular ways. So to solve this problem, EU decides to sign readmission agreements with different parts of the world, with different countries, and Turkey is also one of those countries. We know that EU has signed 18 readmission agreements so far, and also we have 2016 EU-Turkish statement. So my question is, what is the approach of the UNHCR to those deals, or does EU benefit from UNHCR expertise or sources? So does the UNHCR have a role on signing those readmission agreements? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for this question, which has dominated much of the migration management issues in Europe, but also in other parts of the world for a very long time, 20 to 30 years at least, and even before. We are involved in many ways, both in the general EU type of readmission agreement that we have seen developed in recent times. Before it was national readmission agreements by states. Now we have the European Union trying to have EU readmission agreements with various countries. The first thing is that these readmission agreements should not be in contradiction with international law, and in particular with the Geneva Convention. And the risk is there. And this is why it's very important whenever we have the possibility to be consulted or to make that advice to the European Union or to other states engaging in readmission agreements, which are often necessary and an element of regulation of formal migration management, which is also necessary unless we would have, on the basis of the Universal Declaration, the possibility to freely cross every border, which we see is not the case and has not been the case for a very long time, unless you have the European Union, for example, which has rules of free circulation within its territory. So readmission agreements per se are maybe a necessary migration tool for proper migration management. But it's very important that the provisions of these readmission agreements, as well as the practice based on these readmission agreements, do not contradict the possibility for people who ask for protection to have their applications looked at.
Yes, I think we have a connection problem again. Maybe Mr. Leclerc will try it again to connect us.
EU type of readmission agreement, so that these principles are respected. On the basis of the EU, well, the EU-Turkey statement is not contrary to readmission agreements, which usually are voted in Parliament and are international treaties, be it bilateral or multilateral. The EU-Turkey statement is just a statement, as we know, as has been described. But at the same time, it's a political statement on the part of the EU and on the part of Turkey, which has led to major practices over the years. And as I was in Greece for the 5 previous years, I can tell you that I have observed, I have commented, I have sent very specific letters to the competent authorities of the country in Greece, be it the Ministry of Citizen Protection, which is basically the Ministry of Interior, but also the persons in charge of eligibility, as well as the European Asylum Support Office, because in the European Union you have also not only a national decision, but which is often supported by European instruments, including the European Asylum Support Office. So it is essential that the rules foreseen in the Geneva Convention are respected in these various practices. And for example, when the EU-Turkey statement from the 18th of March is adopted, and it's supposed to be applied on the 20th of March, meaning 2 days later, and that most of the conditions, both in Turkey and in Greece, were not fulfilled for that agreement to take place, I mean, statement to be implemented, it required, and it still requires, even though it's not applied since March 2020 in practice, a very significant alignment of procedures regarding asylum, both in Turkey and in Greece. And this is one of the activities that UNHCR has to continue to do, so that what is foreseen in the EU-Turkey statement does not violate principles of international law, and in particular of the Geneva Convention. I will remain still in these general terms, but of course, all these issues require very specific attention. For example, so far on the Greek side, it's whether an asylum application from a person coming from Turkey, a foreigner coming from Turkey, only Syrians claims would be deemed, how do you say that? Would not be looked at on the main ground, on the grounds of the application, but just on the fact that as Turkey provides temporary protection for Syrians, although it is important and indispensable in our view to have an individual interview of the Syrian applicants, so that he or she can make all the necessary reasons for which he or she wishes to continue to benefit protection in the European Union. It will be possible in principle in Greece to return or to take a decision to return a Syrian applicant to Turkey on the basis of the famous or infamous safe third country rule. So this was a long one, but you had specific questions just on the readmission agreement and the EU-Turkey statement, right? I think I did not forget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leclerc. I think, Furkan, you get the answer. Thanks for the questions and the answers. And now, I think Mücahit Ünsal will ask questions. Sorry, Erce Bilgen will ask questions. Our student related to Turkey and also the refugees in Turkey. Yes, the floor is yours, Erce.
Hello, Mr. Leclerc. First of all, it means a lot us that you are here today. We are very excited. Thank you for answering our questions and spending time for us. My question is, what is the current situation of refugee students in Turkey? What is being done, and for their inclusion in education? What are the challenges and needs to be done more? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think again, I stated that despite having 4 million both Syrians and international applicants in Turkey, we see that the policy of Turkey in the last 10 years has been based on the legislation that I was referring to, allowing access to education, access to health, access to employment, which is absolutely key. Often, so as you understand, and it's also foreseen in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, every child should have access to education. So this is an obligation and a right of any child living regularly or even irregularly in a country. So we're satisfied that this is happening in Turkey. Often, those who are not helped as refugees are those who want to enter secondary sometimes or a tertiary education and university. But we are here in a country which allows both refugees and sometimes migrants or people coming actually specifically to study in universities in Turkey. For example, you have Somali persons who are allowed to come to Turkey from Somalia and study in universities. Of course, if they have the right curriculum and conditions to enter. Sometimes also, but this is also something which is considered here, the fact that they have been refugees or have had a lack of proof of their diploma, which is often an issue, a very important restriction to be able to enter either schools or universities, can be looked at in a more flexible way because the refugee cannot prove by the issuance of a document access to the possession of that diploma. And again, this is something that we see very much happening, understandably, for people who have to leave brutally and abruptly their country of origin. So this way of looking at applications to enter university is also looked at in Turkey, which allows other ways than proving through a document what you have done before when this happens. Again, what we see and what we are supporting is scholarships that we also provide through what is called the DAFI program, which is a German-funded program, which allows, I think, Céline, you are here with me, 1,500, I think, students to benefit from in Turkey. And this is funded by the German government. It's important also that this possibility for refugees to continue their study is promoted so that they can stand on their feet, they can become self-reliant, and they can contribute to the society which is hosting them, or may contribute if the future would be brighter again, for example, for Syria, which is not the case as we speak, but hopefully in the future, to have the necessary skills which will allow Syrians, if they voluntarily return, to contribute to the reconstruction of their country. So it's very important, and this is also what we do with universities, with the Ministry of, I don't know all the acronyms well, and the denominations of the ministries, but forgive me for that. Well, the ministry in charge of higher education, basically to ensure that there is this possibility and that support can be provided. And I was told that in your university, you have many students who are of another nationality, in particular from Syria, but also Iraq and Azerbaijan and other countries. So I think it's a richness I hope for all of you to be able to also study with students who are coming from other cultural horizon, and this is also a richness for you, I hope. Not only for them who can benefit from education, but also from cultural exchanges. And for additional information on that, also on all these issues, Céline, we may be able to send to the university a basic, more detailed data, statistics, and even documents, so that we refer to more in depth to all your questions.
Sure, with pleasure, Philip. I'll follow up on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the answers, Mr. Leclerc. Now, Mücahit Ünsal will ask questions related to COVID-19. Yes, Mücahit, you can ask now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leclerc, for having your time with us. I am also should say this. I am very happy to be here and part of this great team. I am Mücahit and I am a third grade student in International Relations Department. I have some questions about the impact of COVID-19 on refugees. Firstly, it has been the impact of COVID-19 on refugees living in camps and urban areas. And specifically, I want to ask that have refugees been included in the COVID-19 vaccination program? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your question. Obviously, not a single part of our world has not been affected by COVID-19, but some people have been more affected than others. And in Turkey, we are still going through some phases of COVID-19. We see that the vaccination is developing. We're happy to see that the Pfizer doses have been bought and will be used to continue the vaccination. We are glad to see that from the start, the refugees, but also those who sometimes are not registered, and sometimes that's more difficult to do, have been planned to, from the start, to benefit from vaccination, which is in line with the policy of Turkey, which is to include refugees, people holding temporary protection in the national programs, as I discussed, including health, but they are included, not benefiting from any priority. They are subject to the prioritization made by the government. So if they are above 55 years old, they are also getting vaccination in the various provinces where they live. What is important there often is to provide additional information to them, sometimes not only in Turkish, because some refugees now understand and speak Turkish language, but others do not. So it's important, and we have been working with WHO and the Ministry of Health to ensure that proper information is provided in Farsi, in Arabic, in various languages, so that all refugees and applicants are well aware of what they can get in terms of vaccination and what they should do to protect others and themselves while living in Turkey. So this is extremely important, but indeed this is done, and we are assisting the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Interior, and any competent organ at the provincial level to pass on this information in a proper way, including through our channels of communication as well. So this is being done. Of course, COVID-19 has had many consequences and difficult ones on, of course, Turkish citizens, but as well as on situation of refugees, including, and this is very worrying, we have seen that up to 68% of the refugee population in Turkey was registered in school, primary and secondary. But we have seen that with COVID-19, it has often been difficult for children in refugee families to be able to have access to the technology, allowing them to follow school, because they may have 1, 2 mobiles, but when you have a family of 6, and if you have 4 children, and if the parents are also using the mobile phones for employment or for other activities, it may be practically difficult for them to follow properly the school. We have also seen some parents who had to take out their children of school, and we have seen more child labor appearing. We have also seen a very significant concern as regards to the decrease of the age to engage in marriage within the refugee community. So all these are very alarming signals that there are ways to deal with the poverty, with the fact that people do not have the means anymore to do as they were doing before. And we need to react to that. And this is why with some funds that were provided by European Union and the US and others, we have been able, in addition to the efforts that the Turkish government has made for vulnerable Turkish families to provide cash for COVID, we have been able to reach 89,000 households, which were seen as being vulnerable because of COVID, and provide them with a one-off cash support at the end of the year. And now discussing with DGMM in view of still the difficulties among some of the refugee population to renew that support again for around 90,000 refugee households throughout the country. So again, COVID times are very different. They are difficult. They are very difficult for all of us, but sometimes they are disproportionately difficult for those who do not have financial reserves, those who are more vulnerable. And it's very important that we can reach out, and even our capacity to reach out was also affected by COVID, as we could not organize as many direct encounters with refugees as we used to do, as well as the Turkish administration does. So it's something that we need to continue supporting the state, the provinces, and the municipalities to deal with as well.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Now, Fatma Gül Oturak, our student, will ask the last question. Yes, Fatma Gül, we are listening to you.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Leclerc. First of all, I want to express that I'm very happy to be here. I'm Gül, and my department is Business Administration, to be in sustainable projects that will benefit society, and I'm very excited to develop and learn to be able to do this. It's great to be part of this. About 4 or 5 years, we have done a lot of work on gender equality since I started my faculty and created resources. We had the opportunity to establish close relationship with UN Women and UNFPA. I feel that this event will be the start of our amazing project with UNHCR. I'm glad you're here. So I have one question. In a scenario where the Syrian conflict is over, what would be Turkey's attitude towards the return of refugees to their country? How would refugees, especially the settled ones, react?
Sorry, the last sentence I didn't hear.
How would refugees, especially the settled ones, react?
Yeah. Well, first, well, thank you again also for this question and this theme. I also forgot to mention one particular issue that on the consequences of COVID that you reminded me. Not only children have been affected, but women in particular. And this is not only in refugee families, but we have seen in many refugee families, the phenomenon also of domestic violence has increased. And we have had more reports of women being subject to violence because of the fact that they have to stay for a very long time outside of the society and only at home. So this is something that globally we have seen as a result sometimes of COVID, but we have also seen it for women refugees and their families, for some of them. So this is also something that we are trying to address with the authorities, with the communities, so that this does not go on and it is addressed. Coming back to the big question of return, I understand it's not only a question for the refugees. Sometimes other people think that the refugees should return. Like, for example, the Danish decision to say that it is possible to return to cancel the residence permits of Syrians because they should be able to return to Damascus, which according to them is safe. Again, I just want to say that in view of the situation and the persistent political difficulties, security difficulties, and all what the Syrian people have gone through, it is not responsible, it is not reasonable, and it is illegal, in our view, to forcefully return Syrians to their country of origin on the basis of a so-called safety. So this we will continue to fight against. It has to be, particularly in those circumstances, strictly voluntary. And some people, for example, from Turkey, Syrians are returning, not a big number of them. This is their choice. What is important, and we are engaged in this with DGMM, and we observe these return movements through the formalities that such applicants want to make, but we have to be sure that it is voluntary. We are also asking the Turkish government to look again at what they had done in the past, which was to allow Syrians to go back to their country of origin for longer periods, up to 6 months, either around Eid but up to 6 months. And this allows, indeed, for those who are able to do so, because again, it's very dangerous in many parts of Syria to go back to, but for those who are willing to take care of a family member, look at their property, and believe that they can do so as long as they can return to Turkey, this is a very important way of keeping the contact with the country of origin and allowing for a preparation of voluntary return when the conditions will be right for that. But such measures after COVID perhaps ends would be important to restart. So it is possible to, again, allow for those Syrians who believe that they can do it to decide to go back, but with the guarantee, with this very strong protection to be able to re-enter Turkey. Because we may have people who are sometimes are desperate, either because they have lost the income that they used to have here, or because they have people in their country who have died and want to attend ceremonies there, and who cannot come back to Turkey. So again, I don't think right now the situation is available for people to safely return to their country. It is anyway their choice, but they should be rightly informed, and the procedures should be well done for that. What we again ask the Turkish government and any government is to ensure the voluntariness of the return, and it will not be in 1 month or in 6 months immediately that conditions will immediately be ripe for people to go back, either for security, for reconstruction, for all kinds of reasons, and it will hopefully be gradual. And I hope that all this possibility of enabling people to exercise their right to voluntary return will be possible. And we are satisfied with the position of the Turkish government saying that any return to Syria has to be voluntary, and that doesn't mean that we should not be preparing ourselves and the people to make that choice, but it's their choice. And I hope the Turkish government will allow that choice to be made, at least for the time that that Syria is not having a lasting peace.
Dear Philippe Leclerc, thank you very much for these illuminating explanations. I'm very happy we are very happy to see you with us. And dear Selin Ünal also informed us that you have another meeting after this meeting. So because of the time limit, we cannot have some more questions from Sevilay Aksoy, our professor, and some other questions we have. But we believe that, we hope that our cooperation will continue. We are ready for the further cooperation. We will be very happy to continue this collaboration. Before ending this meeting, shall we have a photo together with you?
So it's a fake photo. No, it's a virtual photo. Yes.
Virtual photo.
Yes.
If we can get ready.
Smile.
Good.
Okay.
Well, thank you again also for this exchange. I was happy to do it. It's the first one I do with a university, and despite not knowing much about your country yet, but I hope to know even more in the months to come, and visit Izmir as well.
Yes, we are awaiting for your visit to Izmir, and also dear Selin Ünal and Cem Bey, and also UNHCR representation in Turkey, your family and our Faculty of Business family. Thanks for being with us. We hope to see you again. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much, and it was very nice to be with you, and I look forward to meeting you in reality.